I always knew there was something different between me and my father-in-law. He always looked at me when I turned around. There was something between us that I could never share with anyone, something that lurked in the most secret corners of my mind, a latent desire that I had never dared to explore. For years, John was just my father-in-law, a man with a striking presence, a penetrating gaze, and a confidence that exuded a quiet strength. He was the father of Ryan, my husband, with whom I had built a lifetime. I loved Ryan in a way I didn't know how to express, but there was something about John that made me feel an irrepressible tension, something I couldn't control. It was more than just respect. It was something more, something I tried to ignore, but which wouldn't go away. When Ryan told me that his father was coming to spend the vacations with us, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and dread, mixed with desire. I tried to convince myself that it was only temporary discomfort, that he would only be staying for a few days. But as the day of his arrival drew closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that something would happen, something I didn't know if I could control. The morning John arrived, the house was fuller than usual. The mess of suitcases, the preparations to welcome someone who hadn't been here for a long time. But what struck me most was the fact that I was about to be closer to him than ever before. He arrived with that calm, warm smile, wearing a blue linen shirt that highlighted his clear eyes and the lightness of his posture. He looked so at ease, so comfortable in his own skin. Something in me twitched. I didn't know how to deal with it, but the truth was that, from that moment on, my mind couldn't concentrate on anything else. The tension was in the air. It was palpable. For the first few days, I tried to keep up appearances, casual conversations, polite laughter, but deep down I felt John's gaze on me in a different way. He seemed more attentive, more present, as if he saw me in a way that I didn't know how to deal with. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to act as if nothing was happening, but with every accidental touch, every word we exchanged, my heart raced. He could tell. I knew he noticed. The fateful day arrived without me being able to prepare for it. Ryan had been invited to a business event, and he offered to go alone, leaving me with my father-in-law. I knew it would just be a casual lunch, something simple, but inside me, the whirlwind was starting to form. John suggested we have lunch in the garden, taking advantage of the pleasant weather. He always had this calm, serene way about him, as if the world around him was in no hurry. And at that moment, all I wanted was to slow down time, to stay there, not knowing what was to come. We sat at a table in the garden, the soft afternoon light illuminating our faces and the scent of wildflowers in the air creating a unique atmosphere. I was tense, but I tried to disguise it. The conversations were trivial, talking about the weather, the latest family news, but there was something different in every word exchanged. Each sentence seemed to carry more weight, a growing tension that I could no longer ignore. While he was talking about the past, his eyes wouldn't leave me. He stared penetratingly, as if searching for something I couldn't understand. My body reacted involuntarily, every fiber of me feeling as if it were on the edge of a precipice. It was as if there was a fine line between what was right and what couldn't be. He got up to get some more wine, and it was at that moment that something changed. He came closer than I expected. His body was close to mine, so close that I could feel his warmth. I knew what was happening. He knew. He stopped for a moment, as if he expected me to pull back, as if he was testing me. But instead of pulling away, something inside me broke. My body, unintentionally, leaned towards him. It was an almost imperceptible gesture, but enough for him to feel it. And that's what made him act. When he touched me, the first sensation was one of shock, but soon the touch turned into something softer and more innocent, but at the same time charged with something much stronger. His palm found my arm, and he leaned in, as if to whisper something. I could barely process his speech, because his lips were so close to my ear, his breath warm against my skin. The world around us disappeared, and all that remained was that moment, that touch. I closed my eyes for a moment, not knowing what to do. The doubt, the guilt, the fear, it was all there inside me. But when he touched me again, this time on the shoulders, I felt an electric current run through my body. I couldn't go back. I didn't know what was driving me, but I knew I had crossed an invisible line. He was so close to me that I could smell his scent, his firm, decisive touch that left me breathless. It was at that moment that he kissed me. It was soft at first, a tender kiss, almost as if he was asking permission. But soon the intensity grew. I gave in, because I couldn't resist any longer. It was as if my mind had been silenced, and all I could hear now was the sound of my heart beating wildly. The kiss we shared was full of repressed desire, of years of unspoken tension, and for a moment, I lost track of time, of what I was doing. I just lived in the moment. When we finally pulled away, both panting, we didn't speak. There were no words, just the sound of our breaths mingling with the gentle wind passing by. What we had done was done, and I knew there was no going back. But I also knew that the secret was just beginning. "Was that the drink or you?" he asked me, looking me in the eye. "Maybe, and the drink helped," I said, laughing. "But I've always had the urge." I continued, "Please, let's go to my bed before Ryan gets here." "This is going to be a secret just for us. Let's hurry then, my flower," he said, kissing me nonstop. I knew that what had happened to John couldn't be reversed, but every morning I felt more trapped in a dangerous game, a game where there were no winners. Every gesture, every furtive glance became a weight to carry, a secret that suffocated me. I woke up early as usual, trying to hide my anxiety. The morning sun illuminated the corners of the house, the soft light coming through the windows, and the routine went on as if nothing had changed. But deep down, I knew that everything was different. John was there, so close to me, and with each encounter, the tension grew. I felt that he was watching me, not just with his eyes, but with a deeper perception, as if he knew what was going on inside me. And at that moment, I realized that there was no turning back. The desire that had burned between us could not be extinguished. The conversations at the dinner table, the laughter we exchanged with Ryan, it all felt like an act. I was an actress trying to play a role I could no longer control. John was there, teasing me nonstop while Ryan wasn't around. His presence seemed to be everywhere, like a shadow that stretched over my life, over my marriage. And the more I tried to ignore it, the harder it became. I knew that something was about to happen, that the line between what was right and what couldn't be was getting thinner every day. One afternoon, Ryan was called to a work meeting, and, as usual, left me alone with John. I knew it was wrong, but at the same time, I couldn't help it. John was there, so close, and when he offered me a coffee in the kitchen, I couldn't resist the invitation. He seemed so calm, so natural, as if nothing was happening. But our exchanged glances were like a silent conversation, where words weren't necessary. I could feel the tension in the air, almost as if the air around us was charged with electricity. The kitchen was silent, except for the sound of coffee brewing. The warm aroma spread through the room, and the soft glow of the afternoon light touched the surfaces, creating delicate shadows on the walls. The sound of our breathing mingled, and I felt a growing warmth in my body, something I didn't know how to control. With every move John made, I felt more and more drawn to him. He moved closer, unhurriedly, as if he knew the effect he was having on me. There were no words, but the silence between us was full of unspoken meanings. When he touched me, it was as if time stood still. His hand, almost casually, touched my waist, and a wave of warmth ran through my body. I knew that he knew what was happening, that he wanted me, but at the same time, he looked at me with that imperturbable calm, as if he were in total control of the situation. His touch made my heart soar, and without thinking, I turned to him, my body moving instinctively. The kiss was gentle, but at the same time, everything I felt exploded inside me. It was as if my body was finally giving in to a desire that had been repressed for so long. John's hands moved to my neck, with the delicacy of someone who already knew exactly what they were doing. I closed my eyes, feeling his touch, the warmth of his skin against mine. Every second seemed to last an eternity, and yet it was as if time was speeding up, leaving me breathless. All I knew was that, at that moment, I didn't want him to go away. I didn't want to hide that desire any longer. When we finally pulled away, both of us panting, the world seemed to fall back into place. But the feeling of having crossed an invisible line wouldn't leave me. The secret was becoming heavier by the day, and I knew I couldn't live like this any longer. I loved Ryan, but what was happening to John was eating me up from the inside out. The dilemma was constant, like a double-edged sword, where every thought, every feeling, took me deeper into the abyss of doubt and guilt. Over the next few days, the secret became even harder to bear. Every furtive glance, every disguised touch, made me feel like I was living in a constant state of tension. I knew that anyone could tell, that the truth was on the tip of my tongue, ready to be revealed. But I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to deal with what was happening inside me. And so, over the course of a week, the game of seduction and silence intensified. When Ryan wasn't at home, John and I would meet in furtive moments, where his touch was like an unspoken promise, and I would indulge in it with the feeling that I couldn't stop. Each encounter was more intense than the last, and I knew I was risking everything, but I couldn't fight my feelings any longer. That night, after dinner, I knew that Ryan would be away for a few hours, and a feeling of adrenaline ran through my body. It was as if everything that had happened so far was a prelude to what was about to happen. I was tense, but at the same time I felt a growing excitement. The house was silent, and the sound of the rain hitting the window made the atmosphere seem even more intimate, more charged with tension. I was alone with John once again, and there were no more words to be said. He came towards me unhurriedly, but with an intensity that made me shudder. His gaze was fixed on me, and I knew he felt the same way. He touched me gently, but there was an urgency in his movements. He knew what he wanted, and I knew I couldn't resist any longer. When he kissed me again, it was as if the world around us disappeared, as if there were only the two of us. The desire and the adrenaline, intense and uncontrollable, but deep down, the guilt wouldn't leave me. With every touch, every gesture, I wondered how far I would go. But at that moment, all that mattered was now, and I knew that, in the end, I would have to face the consequences, because what had happened to John was not something simple to forget. I had lost control, and the secret was just beginning to consume everything I knew. The house was silent, but I could feel the weight of the secret in every room. Ryan was on another business trip, which meant that John and I would have more time alone. Every moment we spent together felt like a calculated risk, a Russian roulette wheel that I couldn't stop spinning. The desire between us was palpable, stronger every day, harder to control. I spent the evenings trying to act as if nothing had changed, but deep down, I knew that things would never be the same again. Conversations with John were now filled with a tension that only we understood. He was closer than ever, and things seemed to heat up with every furtive glance, every disguised touch. I could hardly breathe, but at the same time, adrenaline was coursing through my veins. Every second we spent together was like an explosion about to happen. We were in our own universe, where nothing else mattered. Time was meaningless. There was just me and him, and the secret that bound us together. But the guilt came soon after. I knew Ryan would be back soon, and the reality hit me like a punch in the gut. What was happening between me and John wasn't something I could hide forever. I knew that. With every meeting, every moment we spent together, the weight of the secret grew. I was sinking into something I didn't know how to get out of. Those furtive hours, the moments of pleasure, were like an escape that made me forget the rest of the world, but every second brought me closer to a point of no return. That night, after dinner was ready and Ryan still hadn't arrived, John and I were alone again. I knew what that meant. He looked at me with an enigmatic smile, as if he knew exactly how I felt. The atmosphere was more intimate, more charged. The smell of food mingled with the growing tension, and for a moment, all I wanted to do was push aside the guilt, the shame, and surrender to everything that was happening. I could no longer deny the desire I felt for him. I could no longer run away from myself. I approached him, my steps hesitant but sure. The pressure in my chest increased, but the feeling of wanting to be there, with him, was stronger. He pulled me close, hugging me tightly, as if he were protecting me from something. His lips touched mine, and this time the kiss was wonderful. As John was going back to his house in a few days' time, he wouldn't have any other opportunities. So this time was the best relationship I had with him, because I couldn't miss this opportunity either. But deep down, I knew the end was coming. I didn't know how, but I knew that this secret wouldn't last forever. The signs were there. John's gaze, the way he touched me, how we hid behind laughter and furtive glances. It was all creating unbearable pressure. The game of seduction and guilt was reaching its limit. I didn't know what would happen, but I knew that in the end, no one would come out unscathed. Whatever it was, I would have to deal with the consequences. But for now, I allowed myself to lose my mind and give in to that desire that, against all logic, was consuming me more and more. Please don't judge me. I didn't do anything wrong because I acted on my desires. It's not over yet. Click on the cards and keep going.